The 2025 NFL Draft is fast approaching, and for my third time, because the first two files got deleted, I will now predict the 2025 NFL Draft first round from the number 1 overall pick all the way to number 32. Yes, I have tried to make this video a few times already. Both times it has accidentally deleted or disappeared or something went wrong with the system, so I was trying to get this out earlier, but I do apologize for that. So I'm hoping that this one will work. But let's get started with the first overall pick. And with the first overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Cam Ward, quarterback, Miami. So Cam Ward, I don't think there's really a question that he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. There have been some debates about Abdul Carter potentially going really, really early, or them throwing this pick to another team that might need him. For example, see the Colts or the Giants. And that is valid. It is a valid thing to say that the Titans could consider trading this pick, but I don't think it's going to happen because they don't have anything secure. And it's not like, while there is great talent next year in the quarterback pool, this is another level of talent in Cam Ward. So I do think they're going to take their shot at him, and hopefully he can be their quarterback of the future. With the number 2 overall pick, the Cleveland Browns select Abdul Carter, defensive end, Penn State. Once again, I don't think this one is really too much of a big, whoa pick. These two are almost certainly going to be the top 2 in some sort of order. So Abdul Carter, he's a defensive end. He's being put in there to replace Myles Garrett, who is getting himself out of there. And likelihood is they will trade for or find a quarterback in the free agency market to hopefully bring them some level of success, potentially making the playoffs once more in 2025-26. But Abdul Carter is their man on defense to replace a not aging, but really tired of being in Cleveland, Myles Garrett. I sure hope, for the sake of Cleveland fans, even though I don't particularly like the team, that Abdul Carter does not follow the same career path as Myles Garrett and leave the team after they suck for a while. But you never know. It's the Browns. Anything could happen. With the number 3 overall pick, we have a trade. The Jacksonville Jaguars are now on the clock. Yes, I do project that the Jaguars will trade their way up to the number 3 overall pick. And with the number 3 overall pick, select Travis Hunter, cornerback wide receiver, Colorado. I do think this trade is feasible, especially with the Giants being the team that they're trading with here. And the New York Giants will receive 2 Jacksonville first-round picks, a 3rd and a 4th in 2025. This is here because Jacksonville needs someone for T-Law, and they also need some guys on defense. So they knock a couple of those out of the way by trading up to get Travis Hunter, and hopefully Lawrence can thrive in Jacksonville unless he gets traded, injured, etc., etc. And this is how they want to elevate him further from his prior playoff successes in 2022 and not his 2023 and 2024 campaigns. So Travis Hunter is likely almost guaranteed to be a top 5 pick. I do think he will be that number 3 pick. However, if this trade doesn't happen, he's number 4. So no matter what, he's going in the top 5. I just project that the Jags will want to make their way up here so that they can land someone really, really good, help out their star guy. So now that puts the New England Patriots in a bit of a predicament. They were obviously going to be the team to draft Travis Hunter, having 1 spot ahead of the Jags. But with this jump, now the Patriots are in a bit of an issue. They have not great defense. They have a terrible offensive line. And Drake May has no weapons. So what I presume that you can do is, rather than kill 2 birds with 1 stone, you can debilitate 2 birds with 1 stone and get the position that can help with your O-line and help with your weapons. So with the number 4 overall pick, the New England Patriots select Tyler Warren, tight end, Penn State. Now, you might think this is a bit of a random pick, and I think it is as well, because when I was going through this, I thought this to make the most sense. And I made this pick because the Patriots desperately need an offensive line. They don't have one. So what can they do? They can use Tyler Warren, not as an O-lineman, but he can be a guy to block for Drake May in certain situations in which he's not being the guy who's getting the ball. And then at the same time, you can, hopefully trade for a few offensive linemen, like Ronnie Stanley, and then figure out a way for Tyler Warren to be fed the ball in the pass game as well as not just being a blocker, because it's not like they have the most astounding running back field out there. This is a way that they can, as I said, debilitate 2 birds with 1 stone. They will still need help on defense and that offensive line, and especially with weapons. Jalen Polk, anybody? Maybe he'll have a career year. We'll see. But this is how I presume they'll figure that out. Then, with the number 5 overall pick, the New York Giants select Shedeur Sanders, quarterback, Colorado. Once again, not really a surprising pick here. They need a quarterback. No one is signed to their roster as a quarterback as of this moment, which is hilarious to me. But Shedeur Sanders is the guy that I project will be the man drafted by them if they trade back to number 5, or if they're even sitting there at number 3. It's just who they're going to end up getting. Because there is no world, even though Travis Hunter is Travis Hunter, there is no world where they would take him over a quarterback when they so desperately need one. And it might hurt to say for them, and the Giants are not the smartest people out there trading Saquon and all, or letting him leave at least. However, I do think this is a necessary move to make. An unnecessary move to make is what I think will happen with the number 6 overall pick, with the Las Vegas Raiders selecting Jackson Dart, quarterback, Ole Miss. Now, this is probably my biggest swing of the first round, but Jackson Dart had a very, very good combine, and I'm kind of happy that my videos kept getting delayed because now I can actually talk about his combine. He did really, really well. He was throwing accurately. He was throwing the long ball. He had good splits and stats. So overall, he did great. So now you might think, he's a contender for an actual QB3. Because in my first couple takes of this, I was like, so it's Cam, and then it's Shedeur, and then it's Jackson Dart. But in the minds of NFL execs, seeing the combine work and looking back at film, I think you can he's not here, of course, but he's risen a little bit. So I think the Raiders are a team that is going to take a swing at him, hope that he can be a quarterback of the future, likely not play him this year, but keep him as a Jordan Love of sorts to some quarterback that they end up trading for, likely Sam Darnold in free agency. As I said, bit of a swing. I don't watch all that much college ball, so please be aware of that. I did ask my friend who does watch college ball what he thinks of this. He said it's mostly right, so hopefully this is correct. Nevertheless, we move on to the number 7 overall pick, and with the number 7 overall pick, the New York Jets select Mason Graham, defensive tackle, Michigan. It said on NFL.com that the Jets really need help on the defensive line, and watching some of their film, that is correct, but they also need help basically everywhere else. So I figured get him one of the best players still remaining in this draft. Have at it, because who's their quarterback? Who's their wide receivers? We will see, but for the moment, it is simply just get the best player available, and that happens to be Mason Graham, defensive tackle, Michigan. Then we move on to the number 8 overall pick, with the Carolina Panthers selecting Will Johnson, cornerback, Michigan. Once again, another Michigan prospect here, as Michigan, as national champions, have a lot of good players on their roster, and once again, another one goes right here in Will Johnson to one of the worst defenses, and especially secondaries in the league, hopefully to bolster that lineup. Now, they do have a couple of good guys out there in J.C. Horn, but I don't think that those guys can hold up on their own, especially with Horn being oft injured. So Will Johnson is here to not necessarily replace, but really boost up that lineup, so that they can at least be a competent defense. And as I did predict them to make the playoffs this year, I do sure hope that they do, even though I'm a Saints fan. Speaking of the Saints, with the number 9 overall pick, the New Orleans Saints select Micah Williams, defensive end, Georgia. Sorry, my computer was also pretty slow. Nevertheless, Micah Williams is a pretty scary dude. He's really big, and he gets a lot of sacks. So I don't really have to say all that much here. There are way too many defensive ends in this draft. I think I picked about 7 or 8 in the first round. So we're going to get to that. And we'll have our defensive end counter right here. Anyways, so the number 9 overall pick, the Saints get some young help on their defense, a very old defense at this point. Demario Douglas, Davis. Jeez, I'm mispronouncing their names. Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, Cam Jordan, they're all getting up there in age. So you do want to get some younger guys out there. And while this isn't going to be the best year for the Saints, it's a year where they can hopefully get some prospects to do at least good enough and maybe shine in the future. With the number 10 overall pick, the terrible offensive line team, the Chicago Bears select Will Campbell, offensive tackle, LSU. Once again, a pretty obvious pick here. He's likely the best offensive lineman in this draft. And I think this is where he's going to end up falling to the team that has objectively one of the worst O-lines in NFL history. So they allowed 70 sacks. I don't think there's enough. I don't think I have to really say all that much. They get likely the best offensive lineman. And when it comes to O-lineman, even as one, all I can say is he's big, he can block in the run and the pass. Bears O-line sucks. Here's how they fix it. With the number 11 overall pick, the San Francisco 49ers select Jahdae Barron, corner, Texas. The Niners have a pretty old secondary at this point, and it's also a secondary that is likely to be leaving in free agency in the droves, really. So they got a really young guy, and yes, you might think, oh, a young guy, he's unproven. You might not know if he's actually going to pay off. But Jahdae Barron is one of the best corners in college ball, especially being at Texas, a very successful team. And I think this is where he can thrive in San Francisco under the Kyle Shanahan defense. And hopefully he does well. He seems like a nice fella. Like he looks like a gentleman. So I sure hope that he does well. And I think this is what they need themselves at the moment in San Francisco. Then with the number 12 overall pick, we get the Dallas Cowboys selecting Ashton Jeanty, running back, Boise State. Probably the most obvious pick in this draft. I figured I would just put it in here because the likelihood is it's just what's going to happen. And you might think, why wouldn't Jeanty go earlier? Why would another team not pick him? I think if you look at the rosters that are there are bigger issues than running back. Like most of the teams at the very top need a quarterback or they need defense. So that knocks most of them out. You look at the Niners, they have Christian McCaffrey, even though he's injured. The Bears could definitely use Ashton Jeanty, but their O-line is way more important right now, etc., etc., etc. This is how Ashton Jeanty ends up falling all the way down to the Dallas Cowboys, who really, 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 really need a running back with Ezekiel Elliott as their top guy. It's not fun in Dallas. Now, after this point, I think my draft knowledge kind of goes out the window. So, like my college ball knowledge. So, I really relied on NFL.com and ESPN here based on what their rankings were, what it said top needs were. So, be aware of that. Take these with a grain of salt after this pick, that they're not going to be the most perfect things you ever see. With the number 13 overall pick, the Miami Dolphins select Walter Nolan, defensive tackle, Ole Miss. So I was talking to a Dolphins fan a few days ago when I was in the process of making this Google slide deck, and he said that this is like a silly pick. But what I read was how their defense is likely old, A, and B, leaving in free agency. So you would rather get defense here and draft O-line later on in the draft, or another weapon for Tua, or the secondary, which are apparently some of the other issues in the Miami territory. But Walter Nolan is really, really good, so I figured he would fit in with this lineup pretty well. With the number 14 overall pick, the Indianapolis Colts, who desperately need one of these guys, draft Colston Loveland, tight end, Michigan. Name a Indianapolis Colt tight end. I'll wait. I can name a tight end from basically any other team right now. Like Jets, Tyler Conklin. Even the New Jersey Jets. And yes, I do have a scarf of them over there that I'm not going to bother go getting because it's going to take too long. But the Colts have no one at tight end. And not to disrespect the athletes, they're obviously really, really good. They're better than most of the people watching this video. They made the league. But they're just not NFL caliber right now. And this is a guy that I think is very NFL caliber in Colston Loveland. Hopefully he does really well for himself as well. He's a great dude. He looks very kind as well. A nice fella. But all that aside, the Colts need an O-line and they need a weapon for Anthony Richardson. And this is hopefully someone that can get Anthony Richardson's completion percentage up from like 47%, which is dismal. Dismal. It's one of the worst overall in a career in NFL history. So I would say it's pretty bad. Pretty bad. With the number 15 overall pick, the Atlanta Falcons select Jalen Walker, defensive end, Georgia. Again, there's a lot of defensive ends in this draft. They kind of roll all together, add one to the end counter. And he's really talented. He's just great at working on that pass game. And he's just going to really help a Atlanta team that struggles on the DNs. Their D-tackle group isn't too bad, but they need someone to team up with their current starting D-end, who's really good, that I forgot the name of because I don't care about the Falcons. And that's who they get with Jalen Walker. With the number 16 overall pick, the Arizona Cardinals select Shamar Stewart, defensive end, Texas A&M. So this is one of the guys that really showed out during the combine. He looked great with his 40-yard dash, with his vert, with everything. He was incredibly good. So I could see him rising. This has not been updated since the combine, so this may change in like creeping up upon the draft. But I do think this is where he ends up falling to one of the most mid teams in the league, picking right in the middle, who also need help on their defense, even though Kyler Murray would love an offensive line and potentially a weapon not named Trey McBride. With the number 17 overall pick, the Cincinnati Bengals select Josh Simmons, offensive tackle, Ohio State. You can make an argument for Tyler Booker here, an offensive guard, because that was the higher ranked position, but I think you can move Josh Simmons to tackle because I think he is a little bit more talented. And big guy, he can block. Again, it's an offensive lineman. I don't know what you really want me to say here. He's good at what he does, and the Bengals O-line is trash. There were a lot of bad O-lines this year. Bengals, Bears, Patriots. They're lucky there's good O-linemen in this draft. Then, with the number 18 overall pick, speak of the devil, the Seattle Seahawks select Tyler Booker, offensive guard, Alabama. Again, he just falls to another team with a terrible offensive line so that Geno Smith doesn't cry and quit his job. What more do you want me to say? With the number 19 overall pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Tet McMillan, wide receiver, Arizona. This is a interesting selection the more I think about it because they have a pretty good offense and good weapons. They have Jalen McMillan, the other McMillan, I guess. They have Mike Evans. They have Chris Godwin. But the issue with Chris Godwin, he got hurt. The issue with Mike Evans, he is still hella consistent, of course, but he's not as explosive, of course, as he once was. He's getting up there. So I think with Tet McMillan, you can get a young guy to pair with Jalen. I was about to say Jalen Polk. He sucks. Jalen McMillan, so that you can have another tandem, hopefully like Evans and Godwin, to move on forward with a veteran Baker Mayfield. Then, with the number 20 overall pick, the also wide receiver needy Denver Broncos select Luther Burden III, wide receiver, Mizzou. I was reading up on the wide receivers in this draft, and there's another guy who goes a lot later on in this draft, in my mock draft, that was apparently really good and should be going high. But I was reading about Luther Burden, and it says that he is great with the deep ball. And the moment I read that, I was like, he's a Bronco. My cat's in here. I didn't notice that. Bo Nix loves to throw the deep ball. And B, Sean Payton loves to throw the deep ball. So there we go. We have our solution for the wide receiver issue in Denver. And it's not really an issue at all. It's just something that, hey, Sean Payton's going to see and be like, you mine. And that's just the situation that it's going to be in the Broncos facilities. With the number 21 overall pick, we have another trade. The Green Bay Packers are now on the clock. Yes, I project one more trade in the first round, this time with the Packers moving up 2 spots to select Nick Scorton, defensive end, Texas A&M. This is a trade with Pittsburgh for a first, a fourth, a fifth, and a third. Obviously not as much as one of the earlier trades, but this is another one to just hop over a team that is also going to select defensive end so that they can hopefully snag the better guy. They pick Nick Scorton over the other option. With the 22nd overall pick, the LA Chargers select Donovan, I'm not going to bother trying to say his last name, Boston College. Again, the end. Both of these guys are very, very talented, of course, and deserve to go really well, but I think Nick Scorton has the edge here. Because they're an edge position. Anyways, Nick Scorton is the guy that the Packers are going to like a little bit more. I've read some of his stats, and he seems to fit with the Packers organization just a wee bit more than Donovan last name. Speaking of, Donovan last name seems to fit a little bit more with the LA Chargers organization, so it ends up working out for both sides, even though Scorton is likely the more talented of the two. But that leaves the Pittsburgh Steelers now, the number 23 overall pick, and they select Ben Morrison, CB, Notre Dame, or Notre Dame, or Notre Dame, or all the other possible options of saying that school. The Steelers desperately need a secondary. Ben Morrison is how they can get a secondary. Problem solved. With the number 24 overall pick, the Minnesota Vikings select Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle, Michigan. This is like the 5th Michigan player in this draft. There are a lot of good ones here, and this is to help out a Vikings defense that is not riddled with people leaving or old people, but it's something that is starting to become a little bit more of an issue. More so the free agency bit rather than the age, though Harrison Smith is starting to get up there, and do not be surprised if a good safety goes next year in the first round for Minnesota. With the number 25 overall pick, the Houston Texans select hometown boy Kelvin Banks Jr., offensive tackle, Texas. Kelvin Banks is supposedly the one guy that, when I was talking to my college watching friend, who is supposed to go way higher in this draft than I have him put here, but I just don't know enough about him to, in good conscience, do that based on what I saw on ESPN and statistic-wise. Either way, he ends up going to a Texas team, so hopefully he fits in well. Meanwhile, the guy that I had right at this slot before I mentally decided to switch them just a few days ago, the number 26 overall pick, the LA Rams select Armand Membu, offensive tackle, Mizzou. Both of these guys are great offensive linemen who are there to protect quarterbacks that need protecting. CJ Stroud because he's a little kiddo, and Matthew Stafford because he's an ancient veteran. With the number 27 overall pick, the Baltimore Ravens select Josh Connerly Jr., offensive tackle, Oregon. Once again, another issue of just protect the quarterback. This is how they get there with Josh Connerly. With the number 28 overall pick, the Detroit Lions select Michael Myers. James Pierce Jr., defensive end, Tennessee. Bing. So James Pierce, the scariest man in this draft because of what he does in the locker room, you don't want to know, goes to very scary team in the Detroit Lions. They have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, and him paired up with Aiden Hutchinson and potentially Shedeur Smith is potentially tantalizing for any quarterback that will face them. I am so sorry, Caleb Williams. You have to face these guys twice a year if this ends up happening. But it's just what must be. I wish you luck. With the number 29 overall pick, the Washington Commanders select Mike Green, defensive end, Marshall. Once again, another great defensive end here. I saw a lot of reports of him potentially going in the top 10 or top 15, and I realized that, but I do think that there are more talented defensive ends, so he ends up falling to number 29 to a still good but not great defensive team in the Washington Commanders. They might be losing Jonathan Allen in free agency, which is likely something that they will need to fix during free agency, and this is something that they can do to at least somewhat get there with Mike Green from Marshall. With the number 30 overall pick, the Buffalo Bills select Derek Harmon, defensive tackle, Oregon. I can't really say all that much about the Bills because I don't really know a lot about their defense, but that's what I'm going to say. I cannot name a Buffalo Bills defensive lineman. I can name an offensive lineman. I can name a receiver. I can name a running back, a quarterback. I can name that 2 tight ends. I can name all that, but I cannot name a single player on the defensive line. Or most of their defense, for that matter, because most of them are retired, other than Damar Hamlin, but that's obvious. Then we move on to the number 31 overall pick with the Super Bowl losers, the Kansas City Chiefs, selecting Matt Bolden, wide receiver, Texas. Again, this is the receiver who fell relatively further than my friend thought he should have gone. I don't really know. As I said, at this point, it's just me guessing based on what they need. Mahomes needs someone to throw to, not named Worthy or Kelsey, who is getting old, and Worthy, who is a speed demon, but not much else. So, womp womp. So you can pair up 2 Texas wide receivers who will hopefully have great careers. Well, not with the Chiefs, because Chiefs, boo. But you get my point. Hopefully have great careers with one another, not just in college, but in the league. And finally, with the number 32 overall pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select Jihad Campbell, linebacker, Georgia. This is to replace the likely leaving Zach Bond and hopefully just bolster their defense a little bit more. They have a great secondary. They have a great defensive line. They have a great offense, but their linebacker core is really the only shaky bit of it. So this is where I think they can benefit with Jihad Campbell out of Alabama. So that is my final first round picks for this entire year. Do you agree? Here is a listing of them all in case you missed one or two. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Make sure to let me know down in the comments down below. Do you think Cam Ward is number 32? Genty's number 1? Shamar Stewart, top 5? What do you think? As I said, I want to hear what you say. Is one of these picks crazy wrong? Is one of them perfectly picked? Likely not, but you get my point. Make sure you have a good day, good evening, good night, good morning, good dawn, good dusk, good whatever. Make sure to watch any former or future videos on the channel. And today, I leave you with, because there's a bazillion defensive ends in this draft, let's go for defensive end. And we will get, that is defensive tackle. Well, I'm getting there. Nolan Smith, defensive end, Philadelphia Eagles. This is his rookie card, so let's get reading. Smith played all 17 games for the playoff-bound Eagles after being picked in the first round in 2023. How convenient. He tallied his first career sack against Tua Tagovailoa in Philadelphia's 31-17 victory over Miami in Week 7. Coolest thing about this moment is Fletcher Cox and BG, Brandon Graham, being right there, he said. As I said, make sure to have a good day, good evening, good night, good morning, good dawn, good dusk, good whatever. Make sure to watch any former or future videos on the channel, and goodbye.